Hey everyone, it's Ashley and I'm back with a video today to show you how you can take 2 layers of iron-on vinyl and layer them together to create a super cute shirt for kids. If you haven't yet, make sure to hit subscribe and click that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any future content, and I give you all my tips and tricks so that you're successful with all of your projects. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and talk about what supplies and tools you'll need for this project. I'm going to be using the Cricut Maker for this project. You can definitely use the Explorer Air 2 or the Joy. Because it is a small project, it works great for any of the machines. I'm also going to be using a Cricut Baby Bodysuit Blank. They also carry shirts from basically every size, from 0 all the way up. They do have extended ranges as well for adults, which is great. They're always working on adding new colors and new inventory. I'm going to be using some scraps up here. This is iron-on vinyl in the color red and black. Dollar Tree also carries lint rollers. They're really handy for these types of projects. Scissors and a weeding tool is really helpful because these are all small details that we're going to be working with. You can use the Cricut iron-on protective sheet. It gives you a nice result. You can also use something like Dollar Tree's butcher paper or parchment paper, and it's a great way to protect your design while you're working on it with heat. You'll want a towel or an easy press mat. Here's some heat protectant tape. I definitely recommend it, especially if you're working with a larger project. You may not have to use it for smaller projects, but I definitely would use it for larger projects. And a brayer. This is just something that I find really handy. I bought it for quilting and I end up using it for vinyl, for all sorts of things. So it has a lot of applications. If you wanted to invest in a tool for yourself, all the accessories and tools and materials are half off right now on Cricut's website. Plus you can use my 10% off code on that one. And I think this is a really great investment. I get the most use out of this. And then I have my Easy Press machine off to the side here. Hey guys, we're inside Cricut Design Space, and here's a project that I put together for little kids. I think this would be so adorable on things like baby onesies and little kids shirts. So I'm going to show you guys how to make this one on a baby onesie, and it's sized for this in the project, but you can just drag and click on the corner if you want to change the sizing of it. So we'll go into Customize. If you want to change the sizing, you can just draw a box around them and hit group, and then you should be able to adjust the sizing a little bit larger for kids that have larger size shirts, like toddlers and grade school age kids. So I'm going to keep it in a smaller size since I'm working on this one for a baby onesie, and we're going to be doing layered vinyl for this. So it's a very easy little project. I know a lot of people are intimidated by layered vinyl, so I thought I'd start you out with a very, easygoing small project for this. And what we're going to do is there's 2 separate layers on this. So the first layer, if you take a look at that one, let me ungroup that so you can take a look at the layers. So there's an outline layer here, and then this is the layer where all the colors occur. So if you want to add like a little pop of color, that's the perfect way to do it. And then that way you don't have to worry about it being super complicated. So this is a great way. You could just do an outline, but I think adding the little pop of color really makes the design on this one. So now that we have the design set to where we want, we're going to click on Make It. And it'll sort our project mats by color because we're doing one in black and one in red. So for this, when we're working with iron-on vinyl or infusible ink, you'll want to make sure to mirror your design. So if you're using a phone or tablet, the mirror option will be along the top of the screen, and you can click Mirror On. When you click on Mirror, it will bring up this side menu here. You'll click here to mirror it, and mirror just means it moves the design backwards. So moving it backwards means that it'll cut it that direction, and so that way when you're ready, you can flip the design over and apply it with heat. Let's click on the next screen. And we're going to click on mirror there too. We want both of the designs flipped on this one. So let's go back to the original and we'll click on continue. So what we're going to do is choose what material we're using for this one. This one is going to be everyday iron-on. So we'll select that. We're going to choose the fine point blade, make sure that's loaded into clamp B, and let's go ahead and load our mat. Let's go ahead and apply our vinyl. So when you're working with iron-on vinyl, you're going to have a shiny side and a matte side. We're going to place this shiny side down onto the mat, and it's automatically lined up so that it's on the left-hand corner. So I'm just going to make sure that's lined up, and I'm going to use my roller tool for this to apply it. You don't have to use a roller tool. If you don't want to, you can use your hands as well. Just make sure you have clean and dry hands. Let's load this into our machine. This is the fine point blade, and it comes standard with all three of the machines. The Joy has a smaller version of this one, but this is the blade that you'll use for most of your cutting projects, especially if you're working with vinyl. So we'll just close that one up. There are little tabs here that we need to make sure our mat goes under, and we'll load it in using the arrow button. Then we'll press the Cricut symbol when we're ready to start. Now we're going to unload our project. We'll just press the arrow button, and you can see the project on here on the mat. When we're ready to unload it, we're just going to flip our mat over and roll the mat away from our project. So I have this little piece of scrap. I need a 3 by 3 inch piece, so I'm just going to cut that out and apply this to the mat. So same thing, this is the matte side and this is the shiny side. It's going shiny side down on the mat, so I'm just going to place that on. I made it a little bit oversized for this piece. And we're going to load this in. We'll press the Cricut symbol to start. Let's unload this from the mat. And same thing, we'll flip this over and we'll roll the mat away. Because these are such small pieces, you'll definitely want to break out your weeding tool. And what I recommend is starting on the corners of where you're going to work. And you can just use this to peel up from the corner. Especially if you're having a hard time getting it started, you can just pierce this section, and then it makes it a little bit easier to pull up from where you're working. So just keep in mind where your design is, and we're just trying to make sure that we don't remove the pieces that are part of our design. Iron-on vinyl weeds very nicely. Weeding is just removing the extra material from your design. So it weeds very nicely. It's very smooth. Just going over this. And make sure you slow down if we're getting to the part where you're working around a lot of details. Just slow down a little bit. You can go back in with your tool if there's any spots that you've missed. And you can hit those with the tool, and that way you can really get in there. Like this tiny little piece in here. And there's another tiny little section in here that we can remove with our weeding tool. This is where it gets the most helpful to use your weeding tool, is when you're working on these super, super tiny little pieces. If you're finding it difficult to weed, you can also break out your mat and just apply it to your mat, and then that way you can use your mat as a base and just go in with your tool and lift it up from that section. Well, there we go. Now you can see it a little bit more close up. You can see that there's definitely some fine details, especially in here and in here. So that's when you're going to break out your weeding tool for. Same thing with this one. It has a ton of details. I'm going to start at a corner just to make it a little bit easier on myself. And I'll work one direction to get started. And remember, the same rules apply to the smaller decals as the larger ones. If you're removing a bunch of the iron-on vinyl and you're finding it's getting in the way of where you're working, you can always cut off the pieces that you're not using, like this, from your project if it makes it easier for you to see. And I'm trying not to touch the design itself. I'm trying to touch around the design when I hold on to this. That way I'm not putting oils or anything on top of the adhesive. As you can tell, this is the back side of the design where the adhesive is, and that's the front. So now we have to go in and remove some of the extra bits, because this is supposed to be an outline for the design. So we want to make sure that the white shirt shows through in the backing, that the red highlights will pop in there, and then this will be the outline for the whole thing. So I'm going to also remove the extra bits from the letters here. So I'm going to turn this back around again. When you're working with iron-on vinyl, also, key tip, make sure that you're keeping all your little pieces that you're removing away from your work area, because it will try to go onto your project, and that will make it a little bit more likely for you to have spare pieces show up attached to your design that you don't need. If you're getting confused about which section to weed next, you can always bring back your picture that you're working from. So you can go back to the design page, check out the image before it's cut, and you can see, okay, which sections are going to be red, which sections are going to be white, and which sections are black. And that way you know, okay, so the hat band on this was supposed to be white, I just removed that. So I need to go back in and remove the little ear muffs, because those are going to be red. We're just going to leave a little outline around them. So that's just a helpful tip. So if you find yourself getting confused, just go back to the main design screen after you've cut everything and use that as your reference. So now we have the basic outline for our design. I'm going to make sure that I've removed all the extra pieces from our work surface, because you really don't want to leave those laying around when you're applying heat. We're inside the Cricut heat guide, and the link will be in the description box for you to go straight to this. I highly recommend it whenever you're doing a project with infusible ink or iron-on. This is a really great way to make sure that you get your settings properly set to exactly what your project needs. So this breaks it down for you depending on what material you're using, what iron you're using, also what blank you're using, what type of t-shirt. So we're going to select the Easy Press 2. Let's select our heat transfer material as Everyday Iron-On. Let's select our base material, and we're going to be using one of the Cricut blanks, which is the Baby Bodysuit. I'm going to be using the Cricut Easy Press Matte. We'll click Apply. It tells us to preheat our project for 5 seconds at 315 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 seconds with light pressure, flip and press for 15 seconds with a cool peel. Tells us what supplies we'll need, how to prepare, and how to apply, and also how to care for it. Because we're doing multiple layers, it changes the instructions that we're going to be using slightly. We're going to be cutting our our design time down in half for this because we're applying it twice. So I'll show you exactly how to do that. Let's go ahead and get started on that. Now let's set up our easy press to the right temperature. I'm using the 6x7. You can use different sizes, but because I'm working on a small project, I'm using the smaller one. So I'm going to turn this one on, and it needs to be set to 315, so I'm just clicking the temperature. It is set to that, and we're going to be working for this for 30 seconds, so we'll leave it on that. Let's talk about layering. I'm going to give you every tip I know so that you can be successful for when you're layering iron-on vinyl. First tip, if you're using glitter iron-on or you're using foil iron-on, do not put those in the bottom layers. Those are a top layer only product because of the texture and the consistency of them. They will not layer well, so you do want to use those only on the top. The next thing to keep in mind is when you're layering iron-on vinyl, a lot of people will try to layer, 3 or 4 different layers of iron-on vinyl. Whenever possible, use the slice tool and cut your design so that way you're cutting your design to have each section an individual one, and that way you can apply it a lot easier and you're not doing so many layers of heat, because it's very easy to kind of overcook your process if you're layering multiple layers of vinyl on top of each other. Whenever you're layering iron-on vinyl, keep in mind that you need to reduce the heat that you use on the bottom layers. So the first layer, the second layer, however many layers you're working on, whatever is not the top layer, you're going to only heat for half of the time that's suggested. So in the Cricut heat guide for this one, the example tells us we need to spend 30 seconds heating our project. Because we're doing 2 layers, the bottom layer is only going to get half of that time. It'll be 15 seconds. We'll let that cool down, and then we'll apply the next layer with the full time on it. Our easy press is heating up. I have a mat underneath this. We're going to take our lint roller and just lint roll over the top of where we're going to be placing our decal, just to make sure that it's in great shape. We're also going to take our heat tape and apply it to the edges of our design, so that way we can make sure that once we place it, that it's in the exact right space that we want it to be and it doesn't move. Okay, I don't think I need to tape both sides on this one because it is a pretty small decal. Let's take a look and pre-visualize our design here of where it's going to go. This is the part that's going to be the filler for the different color areas. So keeping in mind that if we place these on top of each other, that's what it's going to look like once it's done. Cute, right? We need to make sure that when we place this, this is going to look right. So I'm just going to keep this in mind, that I want this to be in the midsection of the shirt. So it's going to be right around here. So, okay, I've got kind of an idea. I'm going to leave both of these layers attached to each other for the moment. When I go to apply it, I'll remove the top layer, but because I'm working on something that has multiple layers, I just want to make sure that I'm placing it right when I first place it. So we need to make sure that we heat our project 5 seconds before we place the decal. So we can go ahead and use something like butcher paper or the heat protected sheet if you'd like, and you can always lay that on there and then preheat it, or you can just preheat it without that. It's totally up to you. I'm going to go ahead and lay this on here and preheat this for 5 seconds on light pressure. So let's go ahead and start counting down. Okay, so that's preheated. Now let's think about placing where our decal will end up being. So I want this around, right around here. I think that's super cute. I only want the bottom section though. I'm applying the bottom section first, so I'm removing this part here now that I've used that as kind of my guide. And let me move my heat protectant tape back on here. So we know where this is going. Let's go ahead and place your butcher paper or your heat protectant sheet over the top, and we're going to put this right on top. Since we we did the first layer with only half the heat, we have to let this cool down a little bit. Normally it's a cool peel. We're going to probably do this as a lukewarm peel. We'll let this one cool down for a bit before we remove it, and then we can place our next section right on top of that and get it set perfectly, and then we can apply the full heat on that. So let's go ahead and let this one cool down just a little bit so it has a good chance of adhering. Okay, now it's ready for us to remove this section. You can always hold down your design. It's not completely adhered to this yet because it's only been on here for half the time. So just keep in mind that when you're working on it, the first layer is not going to be fully adhered until we finish the whole design. So let's work on applying the next layer. To do that, we want to make sure that this one is taped up as well. So I'm going to tape this one just so we can make sure that this one does not move when we're working on it. Because this is an outline, it's going to be vital that this one stays in place and does not move. So now what we'll do is take a look at your design, and because we have the first layer on here and this is an outline, we need to make sure that we line up our outline as perfectly as we can with what's on the bottom here. We really want it to make it look as seamless as possible. So I think that's pretty perfect right there. So we'll apply this down with the tape. If you have a brayer tool, this is also handy. You can use your brayer to make sure that your project is adhered as well as possible. Okay, you can kind of see how this is going to turn out now. So we're going to do the same thing that we were doing before, except this time we're going to apply the full heat onto it using something as a protective layer. It's especially important whenever you're doing layering to have some sort of protective layer between it. Butcher paper, parchment paper, or an iron-on protective sheet. I'm going to put this right on top of that section, and we're going to press this with light pressure for the full 30 seconds. Okay, let's remove that. Remember, this is going to be a cool peel, so we have to let that cool. But before we do that, we're going to flip and press this for 15 seconds. Because we have double layers on here, I'm definitely going to recommend still using a protective sheet or something to cover that. And let's set it for 15 seconds. So this is only going to go half of the time, the same way as it did before. So as soon as I hit that 15-second mark, I'm going to take this right off. And this is going to have very light pressure. Okay. And now I can remove this. We're going to put this back and just let this sit. We're going to let this be cooling down. This is supposed to be a cool peel, so we're not going to touch this at all. Let it cool down completely, then we will come back and remove the covering from the front. So it has cooled down. Let's go ahead and remove a corner. You can always hold down your project as you're removing it too to make it a little easier. If it didn't adhere, you could always add a little bit more heat. Don't ever add more than half of the total time. But your project is more likely to be overcooked than it is undercooked, just because you're doing multiple layers. So what do you guys think of this project? I think it turned out really cute. And layering vinyl, I really think that it seems more intimidating than it is. Just as long as you remember the rules for how to apply it, it's a lot easier than you would think. Is there a project that you guys would like to see that you haven't seen yet on the channel? Leave a comment below and let me know. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any future videos. and give this video a thumbs up if it helped you in any way. I hope you're having a wonderful day.